You know, when we conceptualize a massive transportation network, I think we inherently default to the expectation of rigid physical infrastructure.
Right, yeah, like paved roads and concrete barriers.
Exactly. Think about a major highway system. You get in your car, the road is paved, the lanes are demarcated with that highly reflective paint. Um, there are stoplights at every intersection.
And you've got the exact speed limit posted on metal signs every few miles.
Right. You don't really have to negotiate with the other drivers. The physical infrastructure basically dictates the entire flow of movement for you.
It's a highly engineered, a totally controlled environment.
Yeah.
The architecture of the road itself absorbs a massive amount of the cognitive load required to just travel safely.
But then you transition into the realm of global maritime shipping, and that entire engineered environment just evaporates.
It really does. It's completely gone.
We're talking about a navigational landscape that, well, to the naked eye, is essentially a massive featureless void.
Yeah, an empty blue desert.
So imagine orchestrating a highway system with zero painted lanes, zero traffic lights, where the vehicles sharing the space range from like 15-foot recreational sailboats to 300-meter-long steel behemoths.
Behemoths carrying millions of tons of crude oil, no less.
Right. And to top it off, the road itself is a fluid medium. It's constantly shifting underneath you due to currents and tides and weather.
Which is terrifying when you really think about it.
It is. The fact that the global supply chain doesn't result in catastrophic daily pileups is honestly nothing short of miraculous.
It is the absolute definition of a dynamic, unforgiving environment. A single miscalculation out there doesn't just result in a fender bender.
Right. It's not a dented bumper.
No, it results in billions of dollars in economic damage, profound environmental disasters, and, the loss of human life. And yet, the system works. It functions with an incredibly high degree of reliability every single day.
And understanding exactly how it works is our mission today. So welcome to the deep dive. To you, our listener, the learner, we are embarking on an exhaustive exploration today to demystify the ultimate operational code of the world's oceans.
The rulebook of the sea.
Exactly. We are unpacking the COLREGs, which stands for the Convention on the International Regulations for Preventing Collisions at Sea.
Originally formalized back in 1972.
Right, 1972. And the specific source material we are utilizing for this deep dive is fascinating all on its own. We're working from a 2003 consolidated edition provided via Digitrace software.
Yeah, developed by the Marine Press of Canada.
Yep. And the nature of this specific digital document is a perfect entry point into, well, how seriously the maritime industry takes these regulations.
Oh, absolutely. When we say we're looking at a digital copy, this isn't like a casual PDF that a captain can just download on an iPad for quick reference.
Right, it's not an ebook.
Not at all. By explicit agreement with the International Maritime Organization, or the IMO, this Digitrace version complies with what are known as strict legal carriage requirements.
Carriage requirements meaning that under international maritime law, a vessel is legally obligated to have these exact texts physically on board to even be considered seaworthy.
Precisely. If port state control inspectors board a vessel and that ship does not have an approved up-to-date copy of the COLREGs, that ship can be detained. It literally cannot sail.
Wow.
Yeah. And what Marine Press of Canada achieved with this software is creating a digital framework that carries the exact same legal weight as the physical bound book.
So it's verified.
Exactly. Every single page we are looking at is watermarked. It is tied to a valid nautical service certificate. The software tracks, updates, and ensures the text is completely immutable.
So as we dissect these rules today, we are looking at the exact legally binding framework that a bridge crew relies upon in the middle of the Pacific Ocean.
It's the real deal.
And that level of strict compliance sets the stage perfectly, I think. Because before we can get into the operational mechanics, the precise geometry of who turns where, we have to establish the foundational legal philosophy of the document.
Which is arguably the most important part.
Right. So the COLREGs begin with Part A, the general obligations, and specifically Rules 1 and 2. Now, Rule 1 is essentially the jurisdiction clause, stating that these rules apply to all vessels upon the high seas and in all connected waters navigable by seagoing vessels.
It is the universal law of the water, basically.
But it's Rule 2 that establishes the entire philosophical weight of maritime command. It's titled simply Responsibility.
Rule 2 is the beating heart of the COLREGs. The operational rules that follow it are essentially just guidelines built on top of this one foundational legal pillar.
And the wording of Rule 2 is incredibly uncompromising. It explicitly states that absolutely nothing in these rules shall exonerate any vessel or its owner or master or crew from the consequences of any neglects to comply with the rules.
And it goes even further than that.
Right? It adds this crucial part or neglect of any precaution which may be required by the ordinary practice of seamen.
The ordinary practice of seamen, that single phrase is so key. It bridges the gap between codified international law and centuries of unwritten, inherited maritime tradition.
It's like the ultimate catch-all.
It really is. The IMO recognizes that you cannot possibly write a specific rule for every single variable encounter on the ocean. It's just too chaotic.
Right.
Therefore, the law mandates that mariners apply professional seamanship. You can't just blindly follow the written rules like a computer executing a script if the situation dictates that doing so is actually dangerous.
So if I can draw a parallel here, it's essentially outlining I was just following the rules defense.
Exactly that.
Like if you're driving down a highway and the speed limit is 65 miles per hour, but there is a massive blizzard reducing visibility to absolute zero, and you plow into another car at 65 miles per hour.
You're still at fault.
Right. You can't stand in front of a judge and say, well, the sign said 65. The rules are not a shield against a lack of common sense or professional judgment.
That is the exact legal reality. In maritime courts of inquiry following a collision, investigators will meticulously examine the physical execution of the rules.
Sure.
But they will also scrutinize the proactive thinking of the bridge crew. Did they anticipate the danger? Did they take precautions that a competent, prudent mariner would have taken, even if those precautions weren't explicitly spelled out in a specific numbered rule?
So the burden of command is absolute.
It is absolute. And that absolute burden sets up what is arguably the most fascinating contradiction in the entire legal framework of the sea, which you find in Rule 2, Paragraph B.
Yes, I was reading this section carefully, and it truly is a paradox.
It really is.
It states that in construing and complying with these rules, due regard shall be had to all dangers of navigation and collision and to any special circumstances.
Including the limitations of the vessels involved.
Right, which may make a departure from these rules necessary to avoid immediate danger.
The legal mandate to make a departure, it's wild.
It is wild. The document is telling you that you are legally required to follow these exact rules, but you are simultaneously legally required to break the rules if breaking them is the only way to avoid a catastrophic outcome.
It is an extraordinary escape clause, and it places the ultimate liability entirely on the human being standing on the bridge.
It's like the ultimate legal tightrope.
It really is, because think about it. If you follow the rules rigidly, and that rigid adherence leads to a collision that could have been avoided by breaking the rules, you are at fault for failing to make a departure.
Wow.
Conversely, if you break the rules preemptively and that departure causes a collision, well, you are at fault for violating the regulations.
So you're damned if you do, damned if you don't, unless you are perfectly right.
Exactly. You are only legally protected in breaking the rules if doing so is the absolute last resort to save the vessel, and if that action is deemed reasonable by the subsequent investigation.
That puts an immense psychological weight on the master of a vessel. I mean, you aren't just an operator. You are the ultimate real-time arbiter of international safety law.
Yeah, the pressure is immense.
But to execute that judgment, to know when to follow the rules and when a departure is justified, a mariner has to have a perfect understanding of the variables around them. You have to know what you are looking at in the dark.
Which brings us to the crucial exercise of categorization.
Right. Because how the COLREGs define a vessel fundamentally dictates its rights, its responsibilities, and its physical capabilities.
Right, because the ocean is not a homogeneous environment filled with identical ships. Because human judgment is the linchpin of the system, a bridge crew must first be able to instantly categorize every radar blip and light pattern into a specific legal definition.
And Rule 3 is the definition section, which lays out this cast of characters.
There's quite a variety.
There really is. We have the standard power-driven vessel, defined as anything propelled by machinery. We have the sailing vessel, which is under sail, with the important caveat that if it has an engine, that engine is not currently being used.
Right, that's a big one. The moment a sailboat turns on its auxiliary motor, it legally transforms into a power-driven vessel.
Oh, regardless of whether the sails are up.
Regardless, the propulsion method dictates the category.
Okay, that makes sense. We also have seaplanes. But there is one classification in Rule 3 that highlights how the COLREGs have to constantly evolve to keep up with engineering advancements, and that is the WIG craft.
Wing in ground craft. They are fascinating pieces of engineering.
They sound like something out of sci-fi.
They kind of are. They exist right on the boundary between marine architecture and aerospace engineering. The rules define a wig craft as a multimodal craft which, in its main operational mode, flies in close proximity to the surface by utilizing surface effect action.
Let's unpack the physics of that surface effect action, because it explains why they need an entirely separate legal category. Yeah, let's do it.
So these craft are utilizing ground effect. As a wing moves through the air, it generates high pressure underneath it. When that wing is operating very close to a flat surface, like the ocean, that high-pressure air gets trapped between the wing and the water.
Right, it creates an aerodynamic cushion.
Exactly. The craft essentially surfs on a bubble of compressed air, drastically reducing aerodynamic drag and allowing for just incredible speeds.
And that speed is the issue. They are operating at speeds that completely shatter the normal closing speed math of maritime navigation.
How so?
Well, two standard cargo ships might approach each other at a combined speed of, say, 40 knots. A wig craft might be closing on a cargo ship at 150 knots.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so the COLREGs had to be updated to integrate these vehicles because their maneuverability profiles, their turning radiuses, and frankly, the reaction time they afford other vessels are entirely alien to traditional seamanship.
So we have this massive variety of vehicles, from wind-powered sloops to high-speed wig craft to massive crude oil tankers, all sharing the same unrestricted space. It's a recipe for chaos if you don't have a system.
Right, so to prevent chaos, the rules synthesize these Rule 3 definitions with Rule 18, which is titled Responsibilities Between Vessels. And the synthesis of these two rules creates the definitive maritime pecking order.
The hierarchy of the sea.
Exactly. It establishes who is the stand-on vessel, required to maintain course, and who is the give-way vessel, burdened with keeping clear.
And if you analyze Rule 18, you see that the entire hierarchy is built on a single, ruthlessly pragmatic foundation, which is maneuverability.
Right. The burden of avoiding a collision is always placed on the vessel that is most physically capable of executing an evasive maneuver.
Exactly. It's a hierarchy of capability. According to Rule 18, a standard power-driven vessel is at the absolute bottom of the pecking order.
Because it has engines.
It has engines, it has a rudder, it can turn, it can stop. Therefore, it must keep out of the way of almost everything else. A power-driven vessel yields to a sailing vessel because a sailboat is utterly dependent on the direction and strength of the wind.
But the hierarchy continues upward, right? That sailing vessel must yield to a vessel engaged in fishing.
Yes. But to be clear, a vessel engaged in fishing isn't just like a boat with a few guys holding fishing rods.
Oh, right. The legal definition is much more specific.
It requires them to be using nets, lines, trawls, or other gear that physically restricts maneuverability. If you have a mile of heavy steel cable and nets dragging behind you, your ability to turn sharply or stop is massively compromised.
So they get priority over the sailboat.
Exactly. And at the very top of this hierarchy, the vessels that command the ultimate right-of-way from absolutely everyone, powerboats, sailboats, and fishing vessels alike, are broken into two specific categories.
Let's go through those.
First, a vessel not under command, or NUC. This implies an exceptional circumstance. The vessel has suffered a critical mechanical failure.
Like the steering gear is shattered or the main engine is dead.
Right. Through no fault of their own, they are completely unable to maneuver. They were effectively a floating hazard, and everyone else just has to navigate around them.
That makes total sense. What's the second top-tier category?
The second is a vessel restricted in her ability to maneuver, or ram. Now, these ships might have perfectly functioning engines and rudders, but the very nature of their work binds them to a specific path.
Right. The text outlines examples like a vessel laying or picking up a submarine communication cable.
Or a dredger excavating a channel, a ship engaged in an underwater survey, or an aircraft carrier launching jets. They cannot just veer off course without snapping a multi-million-dollar cable or causing an aircraft to crash into the sea.
So the logic is airtight. The vessel with the most freedom of movement always bears the burden of giving way.
It's very logical. However, there is a fascinating nuance here when we start applying this to the real-world geography of the oceans, particularly near coastlines.
Yes, this is exactly where I wanted to push back. Let's run a scenario based on the strict hierarchy of Rule 18. Okay, let's hear it. So, I am sailing a 30-foot fiberglass sailboat in a coastal approach channel. It's a beautiful Sunday. According to the hierarchy, I am a sailing vessel. Approaching me is a 1,200-foot-long, fully loaded container ship. It is a power-driven vessel.
I see where this is going.
Right. Based purely on the hierarchy we just outlined, that massive container ship is legally required to get out of my way. But practically speaking, that feels like a recipe for me getting crushed.
It absolutely would be. And the drafters of the COLREGs understood the physics of that exact scenario.
Thank goodness.
Yeah, they introduced a critical caveat to the definitions to prevent smaller, highly maneuverable vessels from basically holding massive commercial ships hostage in restricted waters. That caveat is the vessel constrained by her draft, or CBD.
Draft being the vertical distance between the waterline and the very bottom of the ship's hull.
Exactly. When a fully loaded container ship or a massive crude carrier enters a coastal channel, it might have a draft of 15 to 20 meters.
That's huge.
It is. Furthermore, because of a hydrodynamic phenomenon known as the squat effect, as that massive hull pushes through shallow water, it creates an area of low pressure underneath it.
Oh, which actually sucks the ship down even closer to the seabed.
Yes. In many navigational channels, these ships might only have a meter or two of clearance under their keel.
So they are essentially operating in a three-dimensional canyon.
Precisely. If they turn even a few degrees out of the dredged channel, they will run aground, tear the hull open, and cause a catastrophic environmental disaster.
Okay, so they are severely restricted in their ability to deviate from their course because of the relationship between their draft and the available depth of navigable water.
Right. Therefore, the rules state that any vessel, including your sailing vessel or even a fishing vessel, shall, if the circumstances admit, avoid impeding the safe passage of a vessel constrained by her draft.
The hierarchy dynamically shifts based on the physical environment.
It does. The burden of common sense overrides the basic categorization. You cannot force a behemoth onto a sandbar simply because you have sails.
Which perfectly ties back to Rule 2, the ordinary practice of seamen. The rules constantly force you to evaluate the physical reality of the space around you.
Constant evaluation.
But all of this categorization, all of this knowledge about who has the right of way is completely academic if you don't detect the other vessel in time to actually do the physics math and execute a maneuver.
Exactly. The rules require a state of constant, active perception.
And this is the domain of the steering and sailing rules, specifically Section 1. Which is critical because it dictates the conduct of vessels in any condition of visibility.
Whether it is a crystal clear afternoon or a pitch black, storm-tossed night, these baseline rules always apply. And it begins with the most fundamental action of any mariner, which is Rule 5, the lookout.
The text of Rule 5 is deceptively simple but incredibly demanding. It says, every vessel shall at all times maintain a proper lookout by sight and hearing, as well as by all available means appropriate in the prevailing circumstances.
Which immediately rules out complacency. You cannot just lock the autopilot on a trans-Pacific heading and rely entirely on automated alarms.
You absolutely cannot. Human senses are still paramount. The rule demands visual observation and auditory observation. But that phrase, all available means, is the legal catch-all.
It is. It means you must actively integrate your visual data with your radar displays, your automatic identification system data, your VHF radio chatter.
You're just constantly synthesizing.
You are required to constantly synthesize this information to make a full appraisal of the situation and the risk of collision. And the direct byproduct of that constant appraisal is the execution of Rule 6, safe speed.
Now, safe speed in a maritime context is a completely different paradigm than on land.
Completely different.
There are no speed limit signs. The COLREGs do not prescribe a specific knot threshold. They don't say, do not exceed 20 knots in coastal waters.
Because a safe speed is entirely situational. A speed that is perfectly safe for a small, nimble patrol boat in daylight might be reckless and lethal for a bulk carrier in the exact same waters at night.
Rule 6 mandates that a vessel must proceed at a safe speed so that she can take proper and effective action to avoid collision and be stopped within a distance appropriate to the prevailing circumstances.
And to determine that speed, the rule provides a rigorous list of physical and environmental factors that must be calculated.
The list of factors is essentially a masterclass in situational awareness. It starts with the obvious things, like the state of visibility, then the traffic density, specifically noting concentrations of fishing vessels.
But then it dives into the specific mechanical capabilities of the ship itself.
Right. You have to account for your vessel's stopping distance and turning ability. And stopping a large ship is a massive physical undertaking.
Oh, it's immense.
You can't just apply friction brakes.
Yeah.
You have to order the engines astern, fighting the forward momentum of perhaps 100,000 tons of mass pushing through a fluid medium.
It can literally take miles to bring a ship to a dead stop.
And you must factor in external environmental forces, wind, sea state, tidal currents. But one of the most interesting factors listed in Rule 6 is the presence of background light at night.
This is something that would never occur to a layperson.
Right. The rules specifically mention the danger of backscatter from your own ship's lights or the glare from shore lights.
Imagine standing on the bridge of a ship approaching a major port city at night. The shoreline is this chaotic constellation of amber streetlights, neon signs, and moving headlights.
It's visually overwhelming.
Exactly. Against that overwhelming visual noise, trying to spot a single dim white stern light of a slow-moving tugboat directly in your path becomes incredibly difficult. The background light camouflages the navigational lights.
So the rules dictate that if you are approaching a brightly lit shore, you must fundamentally reduce your speed because your visual acuity is compromised.
That's right.
And it's this exact realization that human vision is fallible and easily compromised that leads many to overly rely on technology.
But the COLREGs are intensely skeptical of technology.
Especially radar, right? Rule 6 has a secondary list of factors specifically for vessels operating radar. And Rule 7, which deals directly with assessing the risk of collision, contains some of the most revealing warnings in the entire document regarding electronic navigation.
The rules treat radar with a very healthy dose of operational paranoia. Radar is a miraculous tool, sure, but Rule 7 explicitly warns against making assumptions based on scanty information, especially scanty radar information.
What exactly constitutes scanty radar information?
Well, it means relying on a single sweep of the radar antenna, or just a few intermittent blips on a screen, to deduce a complete tactical picture.
Like assuming you know everything from one ping.
Exactly. You might see a return signal, but you don't instantly know the vessel's true heading, its speed, or its size. More importantly, the rules demand that operators understand the physical limitations of the radar equipment itself.
Because radar relies on transmitting radio waves and measuring the energy that bounces back.
Right. And the text warns that small vessels, icebergs, or other floating objects might not even be detected at an adequate range.
Let's break down the physics of why that happens. A massive steel cargo ship is a perfect radar reflector. The radio waves hit the flat steel plates and bounce right back to the antenna.
Very clear signal.
But a 40-foot sailing yacht made of fiberglass or wood absorbs a significant amount of that electromagnetic energy.
It does.
Its physical profile is small, and its material is essentially stealthy to standard marine radar. Furthermore, the environment itself can blind the system, right?
It can. The rules mention the effect of sea state and weather on radar detection. In heavy weather, the radar waves bounce off the large ocean swells, returning a chaotic mess of signals known as sea clutter.
Which just masks the screen near the center.
Exactly. And heavy rain can also absorb and scatter the radar energy, creating rain clutter. You could have a wooden fishing trawler a mile off your bow, and in heavy seas and rain, your radar screen might show absolutely nothing.
So if you are blasting ahead at 20 knots, assuming the radar will warn you of any danger, you are violating the core principles of the COLREGs.
You are relying on scanty information, which is a massive violation.
So assuming you are utilizing proper lookout, maintaining a safe speed, and appropriately utilizing both sight and radar, how do you actually determine if that blip on the horizon is going to hit you?
Rule 7 provides a geometrical absolute for that.
It states that a risk of collision is deemed to exist if the compass bearing of an approaching vessel does not appreciably change.
This is the geometry of a collision course, often referred to as constant bearing, decreasing range, or CBDR.
To visualize this, I always think of playing the outfield in baseball.
Oh, that's a great analogy.
If a batter hits a pop fly deep into the outfield and you look up at the ball, your brain is instantly calculating geometry. If the baseball appears to be moving to your left against the background of the sky, you know it's going to land to your left.
Right.
If it appears to be moving right, it lands right. But if that baseball appears completely stationary against the background, like if it just keeps getting bigger and bigger without drifting left or right, it is on a mathematically perfect collision course with your face.
That is the exact relative motion dynamic on the ocean. If you take a compass bearing on an approaching ship, and it is at precisely 0.45 degrees from your bow, and 10 minutes later it is closer, but still at exactly 0.45 degrees, a collision is inevitable if neither of you alters course or speed.
It doesn't matter how fast they're going.
Nope. Even if that ship is moving incredibly slowly, the constant bearing dictates that your two tracks will intersect at the exact same moment in time. The rules mandate that you must monitor that bearing continuously.
So we have the tools to identify the danger in open water. But the ocean isn't always wide open.
Far-fetched.
Ships have to navigate through narrow straits, heavily congested choke points, and port approaches. The COLREGs anticipated this density and created mechanisms to artificially structure the flow of traffic.
Rules 9 and 10.
Right. Rules 9 and 10 explain how the featureless void of the water is sometimes carved up into highly regulated, invisible highways.
Rule 9 governs narrow channels. And the foundational instruction here is an exercise in strict discipline. A vessel proceeding along the course of a narrow channel or fairway shall keep as near to the outer limit of the channel or fairway, which lies on her starboard side, as is safe and practicable.
Starboard being the right side of the vessel. So it perfectly mirrors the logic of a two-way street in North America or continental Europe. You stick to the right-hand side of the road, leaving the center open for opposing traffic.
It does mirror that. But because water is a fluid medium, passing close to another massive vessel in a narrow channel introduces severe hydrodynamic dangers.
Physics again.
Specifically the bank effect and ship-to-ship suction. As a ship displaces water, it creates pressure waves. If two ships pass too close to one another, these pressure waves interact, and the low pressure at their sterns can literally suck the two ships together in a violent collision.
Wow, just the pressure alone.
Yeah. Therefore, adhering strictly to the extreme starboard limit of the channel is vital to maximize the physical distance between opposing traffic.
And when the traffic volume exceeds what a simple narrow channel can handle, the IMO implements Rule 10, which is Traffic Separation Schemes, or TSS.
These are implemented in the world's most congested maritime arteries, like the English Channel, the Strait of Malacca, the approach to New York Harbor.
And a traffic separation scheme is basically a meticulously designed routing measure on a nautical chart. It establishes literal, invisible lanes.
You have a defined traffic lane for traffic flowing in one direction, a designated separation zone or line in the middle that vessels are generally forbidden from entering, and a lane for traffic flowing in the opposite direction.
It imposes order on chaos.
It tries to, anyway.
But imposing order creates a new challenge, which is crossing the flow of traffic. Suppose you are a ferry operating on a route that goes back and forth across the English Channel.
A very common scenario.
You must transit perpendicular to the massive flow of cargo ships moving up and down the TSS lanes. Rule 10C governs this, and it specifies that a vessel shall, so far as practicable, cross on a heading as nearly as practicable at right angles to the general direction of traffic flow.
You must cross at exactly 90 degrees.
Now, why is 90 degrees so critical? If I'm driving a car and want to merge across a highway, I don't turn my wheel 90 degrees, right? I angle my way across gently. Why can't a ship just shallowly angle its way across the TSS?
It really comes down to risk management and visual communication. Crossing at a 90-degree angle achieves two vital objectives. First, simple geometry. A straight line perpendicular to the flow is the shortest possible distance across the lane.
Right.
It minimizes the total amount of time your vessel spends exposed to the high-speed, heavy traffic inside the danger zone. You get in and you get out as efficiently as possible.
That makes sense. And the second objective?
Unambiguous communication of intent. If you angle your way across at 15 or 20 degrees, the bridge crew on a massive container ship bearing down on you might be confused. Are you trying to merge into their lane? Are you just drifting?
They can't tell for sure.
Right. By turning your ship 90 degrees to the flow, you present the full broadside profile of your vessel to their radar and their visual lookouts. You make your intentions instantly and undeniably clear. They know exactly what you are doing, which allows them to make accurate predictions about your path.
Okay, we've established the foundation, the pecking order, the speed dynamics, the radar limitations, and the invisible highways.
We've covered a lot.
We have. But now we arrive at the core choreography. We strip away the narrow channels and the TSS. We're out in open water. Two vessels are in sight of one another, and the geometry of their paths dictates that a collision is imminent.
This is Section 2 of the Steering and Sailing Rules.
Right. This is where the COLREGs provide the precise maneuvering instructions for the three primary types of encounters. We have overtaking, head-on, and crossing situations, governed by Rules 13, 14, and 15, respectively.
Let's analyze the big three.
Let's do it. Number 1 is Rule 13, the overtaking situation. On the surface, the rule is incredibly straightforward. Any vessel overtaking any other shall keep out of the way of the vessel being overtaken.
The burden is entirely on the faster vessel coming up from behind, but the rule doesn't just rely on a subjective feeling of coming up from behind. It defines overtaking with rigid mathematical precision.
Oh, I love the math here.
A vessel is deemed to be overtaking when coming up with another vessel from a direction more than 22.5 degrees abaft her beam.
Okay, let's translate that geometry. The beam is the widest part of the ship, directly perpendicular to the center line. Abaft means behind that perpendicular line.
Correct.
So if you draw a line straight out from the side of the ship and angle it back toward the stern by 22.5 degrees, you create a massive cone covering the entire rear of the vessel. If you are approaching from anywhere inside that cone, you are overtaking.
Exactly. You are approaching from their blind spot. And Rule 13 contains a highly specific operational constraint.
What's that?
It explicitly states that the overtaking vessel does not shed its burden just because it manages to pull alongside the other ship. You cannot start an overtaking maneuver, pull parallel, and then claim you are now in a crossing situation with new rights.
Oh, so you're stuck as the giveaway vessel.
You remain the giveaway vessel until you are finally past and clear of the other ship entirely.
Okay, encounter number 2 is the nightmare scenario. Rule 14, the head-on situation. Two power-driven vessels meeting on reciprocal or nearly reciprocal courses. It is a high-speed game of maritime chicken. What is the designated maneuver?
The maneuver is universal and non-negotiable. Both vessels must alter their course to starboard, meaning to the right, so that they pass on the port side of each other.
Left side to left side. It mirrors the fundamental logic of driving on a two-way street in most of the world.
Yeah, exactly.
By forcing both vessels to turn to the right, their combined actions push them further apart, compounding the margin of safety.
But the most complex and statistically the most dangerous encounter is the third. Rule 15, the crossing situation.
Right. Two power-driven vessels are crossing paths at an angle, creating an X on the chart. Who is required to yield?
The rule establishes a clear dynamic based on relative position. It states that when two power-driven vessels are crossing, the vessel which has the other on her own starboard side shall keep out of the way.
So if you look at the right side of your bridge, your starboard side, and see a ship approaching, you are the giveaway vessel. You must yield.
Yes. And if you look at the left side of your bridge, the port side, and see a ship approaching, they must yield to you. You are the stand-on vessel.
Furthermore, Rule 15 dictates the manner in which you yield. It instructs that the giveaway vessel shall, if the circumstances of the case admit, avoid crossing ahead of the other vessel.
Right. You don't try to win the race to the intersection. You don't throttle up to squeeze past their bow.
It's not a yellow light.
No, not at all. The safest, most predictable maneuver is to alter your course to starboard, aiming your ship behind their stern, allowing them to pass cleanly ahead of you.
But this specific dynamic, the designation of a giveaway vessel and a stand-on vessel, creates what I consider the most intense pressure cooker psychological environment in the entire regulatory framework. And this is detailed in Rules 16 and 17.
The burden of action versus the burden of inaction.
Yes. Rule 16 is straightforward. It mandates that the giveaway vessel must take early and substantial action to keep well clear. You make a large, obvious course alteration as soon as possible so the other ship knows you are handling it.
Which is great in theory.
But Rule 17 dictates the behavior of the other ship, the stand-on vessel, the one with the right-of-way. Rule 17 states that the stand-on vessel is legally required to keep her course and speed.
It is an agonizing position for a master to be in. You are watching a ship bearing down on your port side. They're supposed to give way. But minute by minute, the range is decreasing. The bearing is constant. You are on a collision course.
Just watching it happen.
And the law is telling you, do nothing. Maintain your heading. Maintain your speed.
I cannot fathom the restraint that requires. If I'm the stand-on vessel and this massive steel wall is filling the window on my left side and they clearly aren't turning, am I legally bound to just hold the wheel steady and let them ram into my ship?
Absolutely not. The drafters of the COLREGs were seasoned mariners. They understood human error, fatigue, and equipment failure. They knew that sometimes the giveaway vessel simply fails to act.
Thank goodness.
Therefore, Rule 17 is built with a series of escalating escape clauses designed to save the ship.
How does that escalation work?
It begins with Rule 17A2. It states that the stand-on vessel may take action to avoid collision by her maneuver alone as soon as it becomes apparent to her that the vessel required to keep out of the way is not taking appropriate action.
Okay, so the moment I realize they are asleep at the wheel or the rudder is jammed, I am released from the obligation to hold my course.
Yeah.
I may flinch. I may maneuver to save myself.
You may. It is permissive. But if you wait too long, the situation degrades from permissive to mandatory. We reach the threshold of Rule 17B.
The point of no return.
Exactly the point of extremis. It states that when, from any cause, the stand-on vessel finds herself so close that collision cannot be avoided by the action of the give-way vessel alone, she shall take such action as will best aid to avoid collision.
Let's clarify the physics of that moment.
Yeah.
What does it mean that collision cannot be avoided by the give-way vessel alone?
Well, it means you have crossed the point of no return regarding the other ship's turning radius and momentum. Even if the give-way vessel finally wakes up, slams their engines into full reverse, and puts their rudder hard over, the massive inertia of their ship will still carry them forward into your hull.
They literally cannot defy physics.
They physically cannot stop or turn in time. At that exact mathematical moment, the burden shifts entirely back to you. You shall take action. You are legally required to maneuver.
But if I am in a state of sheer panic, taking last-second action to avoid a collision, I might turn the wrong way. Does Rule 17 provide instructions on how the stand-on vessel should evade?
It does, and it's perhaps the most brilliant, life-saving piece of geometry in the entire convention.
Lay it on me.
Rule 17C provides a negative instruction. It states that a power-driven vessel which takes action in a crossing situation to avoid collision with another power-driven vessel shall, if the circumstances of the case admit, not alter course to port for a vessel on her own port side.
This is utterly counterintuitive. If the threat is coming at me from my left side, my port side, human instinct is to flinch away from the threat.
Right, you want to get away.
I want to turn my wheel hard left, turning away from them to open the distance. Why does the law explicitly forbid turning to port?
You have to analyze the geometry of the two ships and factor in the psychology of the delayed reaction. The give-way vessel, coming from your left, is legally supposed to turn to their right, to starboard, to pass behind your stern.
Right.
Now, assume they have been inattentive. At the very last second, the bridge crew on the give-way vessel realizes their error. They panic, and they execute the maneuver they were supposed to do all along. They crank their wheel hard to starboard.
So their bow begins swinging to the right toward my stern.
Exactly.
Okay.
Now, what happens if, at that exact same chaotic second, you follow your instinct and turn hard to port to run away from them?
Oh my God. If they turn to their starboard and I turn to my port, our bows swing inward toward each other. I am steering directly into their escape path.
Yeah.
We would perfectly mirror each other's panic and collide head-on in the middle.
Precisely. By explicitly forbidding the port turn for the stand-on vessel, the COLREGs eliminate the possibility of this fatal mirroring effect. By forcing you to turn starboard into the threat or to simply reduce your speed, the geometry ensures that even if both ships maneuver blindly in a panic at the last second, your tracks will likely push away from each other.
Or at least result in a glancing blow rather than a catastrophic T-bone or head-on strike.
Exactly. It's an intricate, perfectly choreographed dance that anticipates the dancers missing their steps. It builds the backup safety mechanisms directly into the geometry.
It's brilliant. But here is the critical vulnerability of everything we just discussed. This entire choreography, the overtaking, the head-on, the crossing rules, is contained within Section 2.
And Section 2 has a very specific prerequisite.
Right. The very first rule of Section 2, Rule 11, states, rules in this section apply to vessels in sight of one another. The entire system relies on the assumption of visual verification. What happens to the rules when the lights go out?
That vulnerability leads us directly into Section 3 of the Steering and Sailing Rules, which governs the conduct of vessels in restricted visibility. Rule 19.
We're talking about the blind man's bluff. Fog, thick mist, heavy snowfall, torrential rainstorms.
The terrifying environmental conditions where a masto can look out the reinforced glass of the bridge windows and see absolutely nothing but an impenetrable wall of gray.
When visual contact is lost, the rules of engagement change fundamentally, don't they?
They do. The concepts of stand-on and give-way vessels are completely erased. In restricted visibility, every single vessel is burdened with the responsibility to keep clear of every other vessel.
And the preparation for this blind environment is mechanical as well as mental. Rule 19b explicitly demands that every power-driven vessel must have her engines ready for immediate maneuver.
This is a point that highlights the realities of marine engineering. When a massive cargo ship is in the open ocean, steaming at a constant speed, the main engine is optimized for thermal efficiency.
Right. These are massive, slow-speed, two-stroke diesel engines the size of a three-story building.
Exactly. And they are running on heavy, thick fuel oil. It cannot be instantly reversed. If a fog bank rolls in, the engineers deep in the belly of the ship must physically transition the plant into maneuvering mode.
What does that entail?
This might involve starting auxiliary generators, bringing additional steering pumps online, and perhaps switching the engine to run on a lighter, more combustible marine diesel oil so the captain on the bridge has instant throttle response.
Because in the fog, you might only have seconds between detecting a threat and a collision. So your engines are ready. You're staring at your radar screen. And we encounter the blind radar dance. Rule 19D details how you must maneuver if you detect a vessel by radar alone.
The rule mandates that you determine if a close-quarter situation is developing. If it is, you must take avoiding action in ample time. But because you cannot see the other ship, you cannot know their exact heading or intentions.
It's just a dot on a screen.
Right. Therefore, the rule imposes strict geometrical limitations on your evasive maneuvers.
I like to call this the anti-port turn rule, part 2. It says that if you must alter course to avoid a close-quarters situation with a vessel detected forward of your beam, so a blip on the radar in front of you, you must, so far as possible, avoid an alteration of course to port.
You do not turn left, period.
And furthermore, if the radar target is a beam or abaft the beam beside you or behind you, you must avoid altering course toward the vessel.
The logic here is a brilliant application of crowd control in a blind environment. Think of it like this. You have dozens of ships moving through a thick fog bank. No one can see anyone else.
Okay, chaos.
If a ship detects a threat ahead and everyone agrees to only ever alter their course to starboard, to the right, you create a predictable pattern of behavior. Everyone enters a slow right-hand spiral away from the center of the conflict.
It's like magnets with the same polarity repelling each other. By removing the option to turn left, you ensure that two ships approaching head-on in the fog don't accidentally turn into each other.
It imposes a rigid geometric order on a situation where human senses are utterly useless.
But what if your radar fails? What if the rain clutter is so bad the screen is useless, you are completely blind, and then you hear something?
That brings us to Rule 19E, hearing the unseen.
The rule states that except where it has been determined that a risk of collision does not exist, every vessel which hears apparently forward of her beam the fog signal of another vessel shall reduce her speed to the minimum at which she can be kept on her course.
The phrase minimum at which she can be kept on her course refers to maintaining just enough forward momentum for water to flow over the rudder, allowing you to actually steer. We call it bare steerageway.
But the rule goes even further. It says if that minimum speed is still too dangerous, she shall, if necessary, take all her way off, basically stop the ship dead in the water, and in any event navigate with extreme caution until danger of collision is over.
You trade speed for time. When you are stripped of your primary sense and you hear the booming blast of a horn echoing through the fog, you have no way of knowing exactly how far away it is or exactly what direction it is heading due to the way sound distorts over water.
Right, acoustics in fog can be really deceiving.
So the only logical defense mechanism is to arrest your momentum. You freeze, you wait, you listen, and you use extreme caution until you know exactly where the threat is.
It really is like a primal survival instinct codified into international law. But we've mentioned these fog signals and the lights without fully explaining the language behind them. This brings us to the visual and auditory vocabulary of the sea.
A whole other layer of rules.
Exactly. Because vessels operate continuously, 24 hours a day, the mariner relies on a highly complex, codified system of lights and shapes, outlined in Part C and Annex I, to communicate identity and heading.
By day, when the sun is up, vessels hoist large, black, geometric shapes, balls, diamonds, cones, and cylinders high into their rigging where they can be silhouetted against the sky. By night, they illuminate specific, mathematically precise arrangements of colored lights.
Let's map out the basic canvas. The geometry of standard ship lights found in Rules 21 and 22. If I am looking at a standard 200-meter-long cargo ship navigating at night, what is the fundamental lighting configuration?
The absolute foundation of the configuration is the masthead light. It is a brilliant white light placed high over the fore and aft center line of the vessel, and the engineering of the light housing is critical.
How so?
It does not shine in a 360-degree circle. The housing is physically baffled so that it shows an unbroken light over an arc of the horizon of exactly 225 degrees. It points straight ahead over the bow, and the light extends out to the sides, stopping exactly 22.5 degrees abaft the beam on either side.
Okay, a 225-degree wedge of white light facing forward. And then we add the side lights.
Yes, the navigational side lights. A green light positioned on the starboard side and a red light positioned on the port side. Each of these colored lights covers an arc of exactly 112.5 degrees.
So they split that forward wedge.
They shine for straight ahead over the bow, back along the side of the ship, and cut off at that exact same angle, 22.5 degrees abaft the beam.
And finally, to cover the rear of the ship, we have the stern light. A white light placed as nearly as practicable at the stern, pointing directly backward.
And its arc of visibility is exactly 135 degrees.
Now let's do the math on these arcs, because this is where the physical engineering perfectly intertwines with the legal text. 112.5 degrees for the green light plus 112.5 degrees for the red light equals 225 degrees of forward coverage.
Yeah. Right.
Add the 135-degree arc of the stern light, and you get exactly 360 degrees. The entire horizon is perfectly covered without any overlap. But more impressively, look at where those boundary lines fall.
The cutoff points.
Yes, the side lights cut out exactly 22.5 degrees abaft the beam. Where have we heard that exact measurement before?
It is the precise mathematical definition of an overtaking situation from Rule 13.
Exactly. Rule 13 stated you are overtaking if you approach from more than 22.5 degrees abaft the beam. The physical light housings are engineered to manifest that legal boundary in the dark.
It's beautifully designed.
If you are approaching a ship from behind and you are inside that 135-degree stern light arc, you only see a white light. You immediately know, based purely on the color of the light, that you are the overtaking vessel and must keep clear.
The moment your ship crosses that geometric boundary line, the moment the white stern light cuts out and you see the red or green side light emerge from the darkness, your legal status changes from an overtaking vessel to a crossing vessel. The lights literally draw the legal boundaries of the COLREGs across the surface of the ocean.
It is a stunning piece of unified design. Now, for ships longer than 50 meters, they must carry a second masthead light positioned higher and further aft than the forward one.
This provides depth perception and heading information. If you see two white masthead lights in the distance and the lower light is to the right of the higher light, you instantly know the bow of the ship is pointed to your right. You can deduce their heading before you can even see the hull of the ship.
So that establishes the baseline for a normal ship-making way. But what about the special operations we discussed earlier? The vessels that dictate the right-of-way hierarchy.
The secret code.
Right, rules 24 through 30 dictate a secret code of extra lights and shapes to broadcast their status. Let's decode some of these. What does a vessel towing another vessel look like?
A power-driven vessel towing another vessel will display two white masthead lights in a vertical line instead of just one. But towing can be incredibly dangerous depending on the length of the tow line.
Because some of those lines are massive.
Oh, yeah. Some ocean-going tugs drag barges on massive steel cables that stretch over half a mile behind them. So if the length of the tow exceeds 200 meters, the tug must display three white masthead lights in a vertical line. And above their standard white stern light, they display a yellow towing light.
And by day, how do you see that massive cable?
You can't always see the cable. But by day, if the tow exceeds 200 meters, both the towing vessel and the vessel being towed must display a large black diamond shape in their rigging. It is a visual warning, do not try to cross between us.
What about the fishing vessels, ones constrained by their gear?
A vessel engaged in trawling, which is dragging a dredge net or other apparatus through the water, displays two all-round lights in a vertical line, the upper being green and the lower white. Mariners memorize this with the mnemonic, green over white, trawling at night.
Well, that's handy. By day, what is it?
By day, they display a shape consisting of two black cones with their apexes pointing together, resembling an hourglass.
Green over white, trawling at night. Got it. And if they are engaged in fishing other than trawling, like a vessel deploying miles of long lines?
That requires red over white lights. Red over white, fishing at night.
What about our absolute top priority vessels? The vessels not under command. The ones whose engines have failed and are dead in the water.
They display two all-round red lights in a vertical line. The mnemonic is red over red, the captain is dead.
Oh, wow. Morbid, but effective.
It is the most ominous light configuration on the sea. It means I have zero control of this ship, stay away from me. By day, this is represented by two black balls hoisted in a vertical line.
But let me ask about a fringe scenario that highlights the exhaustiveness of these rules. Say, I'm an offshore oil company, and I need to transport a massive, flexible rubber bladder full of fuel. It is mostly submerged, it doesn't have a rigid hull, and it certainly doesn't have a mast to hang a light on. If a tugboat is dragging this invisible hazard through a busy channel at night, how do they prevent a yacht from driving right over the submerged tow line and slicing the bladder open.
The COLREGs anticipated exactly this scenario. Rule 24G governs what it terms an inconspicuous, partly submerged vessel or object, or a combination of such vessels or objects being towed. The rules explicitly use the term dracones to describe these flexible, towable containers.
Dracones. It sounds like they're towing a sea monster.
Functionally, they are towing a massive, invisible hazard. Because they have no mast, the rules require you to outline the hazard itself. The dracone must be illuminated by an all-round white light at its extreme forward end and another at its extreme after end.
Just marking the boundaries.
Right. If the object is wider than 25 meters, you must place lights at the absolute extremities of its breadth. And if it is over 100 meters long in the water, you must place additional all-round white lights at intervals not exceeding 100 meters along its entire length.
And by day.
By day, you must place a black diamond shape at the absolute furthest extremity of the tow. The objective is to draw a glowing, undeniable boundary around the invisible object so no other vessel misjudges the safe distance.
The level of rigorous detail applied to every possible scenario is just staggering. But lights and shapes rely on a passive transmission of information. They only work if the bridge crew of the other ship is actively looking out the window.
Very true.
What happens when the lights aren't noticed, or when intentions are dangerously misunderstood? You have to aggressively project your intentions. You have to speak to them. This brings us to Part D of the regulations, sound signals and distress.
When visual geometry fails to resolve a situation, mariners rely on acoustics. And just like the lighting configurations, the actual physical instruments required to generate these sounds are heavily regulated based on the sheer size of the vessel.
The required equipment list in Rules 32 and 33 is fascinating. If you are operating a vessel less than 12 meters in length, the law is quite lax. You just need some means of making an efficient sound signal. A compressed air horn from a sporting goods store technically satisfies the requirement.
But as the mass of the vessel increases, the acoustic requirements scale up dramatically.
Right. If your vessel is 20 meters or more, you are legally required to carry a specific certified whistle and a bell. And if you are commanding a vessel 100 meters or more in length, you must have a whistle, a bell, and a gong.
A gong sounds almost archaic, but there is a deeply pragmatic physical reason for its inclusion. Annex 3 of the COLREGs dictates the technical specifications of these instruments. The rules explicitly require that the tone and sound of the gong cannot possibly be confused with the tone of the bell.
Beauty contrast.
Exactly. You need two distinct, highly recognizable percussive signatures that can travel through fog and wind.
And the regulations governing the whistles themselves are rooted in the physics of sound propagation. Annex 3 dictates the fundamental frequencies of the whistles based on ship length. A massive 200-meter-long tanker must have a whistle frequency between 70 and 200 hertz.
That is an incredibly deep, low bass tone.
Why force large ships to use low frequencies?
Because of how sound waves interact with the environment. High-frequency sounds attenuate or lose energy very quickly when traveling over water, especially if there is wind or rain.
Oh, so they fade out faster.
Right. Low-frequency sounds, however, have long wavelengths that can wrap around obstacles and punch through ambient weather noise carrying for miles. A smaller vessel will have a higher-pitched whistle. So in the pitch black, a trained mariner can literally hear the approximate mass of an approaching ship simply by the pitch of its horn.
The physics of sound engineered directly into the law. So what are they actually communicating with these meticulously engineered whistles? Rule 34 outlines the maneuvering and warning signals. When two ships are in sight of one another and they are preparing to execute the choreography we discussed earlier, they announce their moves.
Exactly. One short blast on the whistle, lasting about 1 second, means I am altering my course to starboard. 2 short blasts means I am altering my course to port. 3 short blasts means I am operating a stern propulsion, which tells the other ship you are throwing the engines in reverse to kill your headway.
It is the maritime equivalent of a turn signal and brake lights, but blasted over a radius of several miles. However, my absolute favorite application of the whistle is the universal signal for maritime frustration found in Rule 34.
Ah, yes, the 5 short blasts.
The rule states that when vessels in sight of one another are approaching, and from any cause either vessel fails to understand the intentions or actions of the other, or is in doubt whether sufficient action is being taken, the vessel in doubt shall immediately indicate such doubt by giving at least 5 short and rapid blasts on the whistle.
Officially, it is the signal of doubt. Practically speaking, it is the maritime equivalent of laying your hand on the car horn in traffic.
Just a giant WTF button.
Pretty much. It is an aggressive staccato alarm designed to jolt the other bridge crew out of complacency and demand immediate clarification of their intentions.
But all of these maneuvering signals, the 1 blast, 2 blasts, 5 blasts, are predicated on the vessels being inside of one another. As we established, when the fog rolls in, everything changes. Rule 35 outlines the sound signals to be used in restricted visibility.
You can't use the turn signals if no one can see you turning, so you must transition to announcing your basic existence and status.
In restricted visibility, the whistle becomes a continuous radar beacon. A power-driven vessel making way through the water must sound one prolonged blast, a blast lasting 4 to 6 seconds, at intervals of not more than 2 minutes. A booming, low-frequency roar declaring, "I am moving forward."
If the power-driven vessel is underway but stopped and making no way through the water, they found 2 prolonged blasts every 2 minutes.
And what about the vessels that are constrained by their operations? The fishing vessels, the vessels not under command, or the towing vessels?
They utilize a complex blast. 1 prolonged blast followed immediately by 2 short blasts sounded every 2 minutes. It immediately tells anyone listening in the blind environment, "I am here, and due to my operational status, I cannot easily get out of your way."
And where do the bell and the gong come into play?
They are utilized when a vessel is anchored in the fog. Because the vessel is physically tethered to the seabed and not underway, sounding a whistle might confuse approaching ships into thinking she is moving.
That makes sense. So what do they do?
Instead, a vessel at anchor must ring the bell rapidly for about 5 seconds, at intervals of not more than 1 minute.
And if it is one of those massive ships, over 100 meters in length?
Then the spatial acoustics come into play. They ring the bell rapidly in the forepart of the vessel, and immediately after the ringing of the bell, the gong is sounded rapidly for about 5 seconds in the after part of the vessel.
The acoustic differentiation paints a sonic map. If you are creeping through a dense fog bank, and you hear the frantic ringing of a bell echoing from off your port bow, followed immediately by the deep reverberation of a gong echoing from your starboard bow, your brain instantly connects the dots.
The bell's the front, the gong is the back.
Right. You are looking at a 100-meter-long steel wall parked directly across your path. You throw the engines full astern and blast 3 short bursts on your whistle.
It is a phenomenal system of acoustic orientation.
But despite the rigorous training, despite the mathematical light arcs, the radar analysis, the geometries of the crossing rules, and the sonic maps, human error, mechanical failure, or overwhelming weather can shatter the system. When a collision occurs or a vessel is sinking, we abandon the rules of navigation and turn to Annex 4, distress signals.
This is the ultimate worst-case scenario. When a vessel is in distress and requires immediate assistance, all hierarchy, all rules of right-of-way become irrelevant. The singular goal is survival and the attraction of rescue forces.
Annex 4 lists a comprehensive array of signals. Many of them utilize the radio and electronic frequencies that dominate modern shipping. The transmission of the spoken word Mayday over VHF radio telephone, the activation of emergency position indicating radio beacons, or EPI-ARBs, that beam a GPS location to satellites.
And the use of search and rescue transponders, SARTs, that interact with the radar waves of passing ships to paint a massive, undeniable distress pattern on their screens.
And it includes the historical, visual, and auditory signals, right? The SOS signal transmitted by Morse code, firing a gun or explosive signal at intervals of about a minute, rockets throwing red stars, a signal consisting of a square flag with a ball hoisted above or below it.
Burning a tar barrel on the deck to create a massive column of flames, releasing orange-colored smoke.
It is an arsenal of high-tech electronics, pyrotechnics, and radio waves designed to scream for help across the void. But as I read through Annex 4, past the EPI-RBs and the radar transponders, I found one specific authorized distress signal tucked into the list in paragraph 1K that is profoundly sobering in its simplicity.
I know the one.
The authorized signal is slowly and repeatedly raising and lowering arms outstretched to each side.
It strips away all the technology, all the massive diesel engines, all the international legal frameworks, and reduces the situation to its rawest element. At the end of the day, maritime navigation is just human beings out on the unforgiving water trying to get home.
Just waving their arms.
Right. When the power is dead, the radios are flooded, and the flares are spent, waving your arms in a desperate plea for help is as primal as it gets. And the IMO saw fit to codify that raw human action right alongside the satellite beacons.
It grounds the entire document. It reminds us of the stakes. We have navigated the heavy legal philosophy of the ordinary practice of seamen, the intricate hydrodynamic realities of vessels constrained by draft, the severe limitations of marine radar, the pressure cooker psychology of the stand-on vessel,
The brilliant geometry of the anti-port turn.
the mathematical perfection of the lighting arcs, and the complex acoustic physics of the fog signals. Thank you for acting as our pilot through this incredibly dense, life-saving text.
It has been a fascinating exploration. The COLREGs are truly a masterpiece of regulatory design. They manage to intertwine rigid mathematical geometry and physics with the inherently flexible, highly subjective requirement of human judgment and professional seamanship.
They provide the absolute parameters of safety, but they demand that the mariner be the ultimate arbiter of survival. Before we conclude this deep dive, what is a final provocative thought regarding the COLREGs for our listener to mull over?
Well, consider the sheer scale of trust involved in this system. The entire global supply chain, the movement of billions of dollars of raw materials, food, technology, and energy, as well as the lives of millions of seafarers, relies utterly on this single document from 1972.
It's staggering.
Every day and every night, mariners of vastly different nationalities, speaking different languages, operating under different cultural norms, cross paths in the dark. They often cannot even speak to each other on the VHF radio due to language barriers. Yet they share the exact same operational reality.
They agree to this unwritten social contract.
They do. The next time you feel overwhelmed by bureaucratic rules or frustrated by a lack of cooperation in society, consider the COLREGs. It is a profound testament to the fact that when the stakes are literally life and death, human beings are incredibly capable of cooperating in the dark, relying on nothing more than a shared belief in the meaning of a green light, a red light, and the occasional blast of a whistle.
That is a phenomenal perspective. The ocean may lack the physical painted infrastructure of our highways, but the infrastructure absolutely exists. It is just built out of geometry, acoustics, light, and a massive globe-spanning foundation of mutual trust. Thank you to the learner for joining us, and keep diving deep.